My husband used to say the land would outlast both of us. He said it the morning he put in the fence posts, said it again. The afternoon we buried our old dog under the elm tree, and he said it one last time from a hospital bed, squeezing my hand so hard his knuckles went white. The land will outlast us, Dottie. You hold on to it. He died 4 days later, and I have held on to it for 31 years since. I was 83 years old the summer the county came for it. The notice arrived on a Tuesday. A man in a gray sedan pulled up to my gate like he owned it already, stepped out with a clipboard and a laminated badge, and told me that there was an irregularity in the original deed transfer from 1987, that the parcel had been flagged for administrative review, and that I would need to vacate the property within 60 days pending resolution. He said it the way people say things they have rehearsed until the meaning has drained out of them. He didn't look at me when he spoke. He looked at his clipboard. I was still holding his notice when the motorcycle turned off the county road and slowed at the end of my drive. I don't know what made the rider stop. Maybe it was a sedan. Maybe it was an old woman standing at her own gate with a piece of paper and no expression she could account for. He pulled up, cut the engine, and took off his helmet, and I saw a man somewhere in his 40s, big through the shoulders, a leather vest covered in patches, a beard going gray at the jaw. He had road burn on his left forearm, fresh, pinkish, the kind you get when asphalt finds skin. I asked if he needed water, that was all. I asked if he needed water, and I told him that wound ought to be cleaned before it found reason to turn. He looked at the notice in my hand. He looked at the gray sedan pulling back onto the road, and then he said, "Yes, ma'am, water would be fine." I brought him inside. I cleaned that road burn with soap and warm water, and wrapped it the way I learned when my husband came back from Korea, with worse than that on both arms. The rider sat at my kitchen table like a man who hadn't been to kitchen for a while, and he asked me what the paper said. So I told him. I told him about my husband, Ray, about his 30 years of farming this ground, and the 4-acre parcel he purchased from the Hendersons in 1987, cash money, recorded at the county office his own self, about how the deed had never been in dispute in 31 years, about how a different man from this same county office had come twice before, in the past year, both times with questions, both times backing off when I showed him the paperwork, about how the paperwork had gone missing from my file cabinet last March, after a county appraiser asked to use my bathroom. The writer listened. He didn't say much. He drank his water, and he looked at the backs of his hands, and when I was done, he said, quietly, that didn't sound like an irregularity to him. It sounded like theft. He left 20 minutes later. He shook my hand at the door, both of his wrapped around mine, and he told me his name was Garrett, and he told me not to go anywhere. I didn't know what he meant. I was 83 years old, and I had nowhere to go. 3 mornings later, I heard them before I saw them. I was on the porch with my coffee, the way I am every morning, watching the light come up over the east field the way Ray loved to watch it. And I heard a sound like distant thunder, except the sky was clear. It grew, and it grew, and it kept growing, and I set down my coffee because my hand had started to shake. They came around the bend in the county road in a line that had no visible end. Motorcycles. Dozens of them, then more. Their engines filled the valley the way Ray always said a full choir ought to fill a church, right up into the rafters, and then past them. They turned off the road at my gate, and lined the drive, and lined the road beyond, and kept lining it, one after another, until I stopped counting at 50 and the line still hadn't stopped. A man in front, older than the rest, a gray beard all the way to his chest, a president's patch on his vest, walked up my porch steps and took off his hat and introduced himself. He told me Garrett had called. He told me the chapter had made some calls of their own, 2 chapters in 3 other counties. He told me they'd pulled the original deed from the state archive, because the state keeps a copy even when the counties goes missing, and that a lawyer who rode with their Tulsa chapter had filed an injunction that morning restraining the county from any further action on the property. Then he said, "And we thought you might like some company while the law sorted itself out." 97 writers, I was told later, from 4 chapters, across 2 states. They had taken personal days and vacation days, and some of them had driven through the night. They parked on my road and my drive, and they did not leave for 2 days. They fixed the fence line. Ray never got around to finishing. They repaired the roof of the equipment shed. They brought food. More food than I had seen in one place since my daughter's wedding. And they set up folding tables under the elm tree and we ate together in the shade of it, a woman of 83 and 97 men in leather, and it was one of the finest afternoons of my life. The county official came back on the second morning. He brought a deputy. They stopped at the end of my drive and looked at the motorcycles, and at the riders standing along the fence line, and at the lawyer, a lean young man with a Tulsa chapter patch and a briefcase, who walked down to meet them with the injunction and the archived deed and a look on his face that I imagine a man gets when he has been waiting for a particular conversation. They did not get out of their car. They left. I never saw that particular official again. The injunction held. The deed was certified. The property has been mine, clearly and without question, in the years since. I am older now. I sit on this porch more than I used to. My hip has opinions that I didn't ask for, and the mornings take me longer to get through. But I sit here with my coffee, and I look at the East Field, and I think about what Ray said, and I think I understand it now in a way I didn't before. He wasn't only talking about the land. He was talking about what holds when everything else tries to let go, what refuses to turn loose, what shows up in a line around the bend of a county road, like a sound your heart makes when it decides it isn't finished yet. There is a photograph on my mantel, taken that second morning. A neighbor I didn't know came over and knocked on my door, camera in hand, and asked if he could take a picture. It shows the road in front of my property, lined from the gate all the way to the curve, motorcycles and men in leather standing along both sides, and in the front of it all, on my porch, an old woman in her house dress with her coffee, looking like she is exactly where she belongs. I look at it on the hard mornings. I look at it when the hip won't cooperate, and the house feels large and quiet, and I miss Ray so much it sits on my chest like something physical. And I remember what Garrett said when he called me, a week after it was over, just to check. I told him I didn't know how to thank them. I told him I didn't know what I had done to deserve that kind of answer. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You gave a stranger a glass of water and cleaned his arm. You sat him at your table and treated him like a man. That's enough. That's more than enough for us." Ray would have liked that. He would have liked it very much. The land is still here. The elm tree is still here. And on certain mornings, when the light comes up over the East Field, and the world is quiet and good, I can almost hear the engines again, low and steady and sure, rolling around the bend, like something that never intended to leave.